Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2020 GMC Sierra 3500, we're going to be showing you how to install the Airlift air helper springs for the rear axle. But before we get into that, let's pull into the garage. We'll take a minute, check these out, and make sure they're going to be the right upgrade for you. Here's how the airbags can look once you have them installed on your truck, and it's a really simple concept. What these are going to help prevent is primarily sagging. You know, I'm sure you've all experienced it if you're watching this right now. You know, you hook up to a super heavy trailer or, you know, have a big payload in the bed of your truck. Truck wants to squat down, and that does all sorts of things. You know, puts unnecessary wear and tear on your suspension. The ride isn't as comfortable because your suspension doesn't have the rebound and, you know, compression that it did without that load in the bed or hooked up to your hitch. You know, if you tow a lot like that, you can start to get excessive tire wear. It does a lot of things, you know, even when it comes to steering, braking, all that stuff. So having an air spring back here will let you compensate for that load. You know, if everything's weighed down, you fill a bag up full of air to whatever pressure that you see fit to get the factory ride height achieved again. And the way these are going to work, they're just going to fill that void between the bottom of your frame rail and the top of your axle, and they're going to replace the factory type John's bumper here, which all these do from the factory is prevent the truck from completely bottoming out. They're not providing any additional support. And with this bag, so this bag has the internal John's bumper. So more or less it has something very similar to this inside of the bag that acts as a fail-safe. So if something were to happen to the bag, or you know, you have super low pressure in it and a ton of weight, it would still be able to bottom out and rest on this and not you know, potentially damage other things. So that's really the big difference. There's other airlift bags that don't have these John's bumpers inside, and that's the main difference between those. With that said, these are going to be adjustable from 5 to 100 psi, and most people find themselves somewhere in the middle usually as far as the pressure is concerned, and they're going to have a 5,000 pound maximum load carrying capacity. So keep in mind, that's not going to add to the capacity of what your truck can actually handle. That's just what the bags are rated for. One of the advantages that an airbag system has over some of the other suspension enhancements is the fact that it is adjustable, right? So you can really get your truck dialed in and fine tune it to find that perfect ride where everything's comfortable and you get the best performance. Now, one of the things to think about with that system, with the airbag system, is they are going to require a little bit of maintenance, and this pretty much holds true across the board. A lot of the bags, including these, are going to require at least 5 pounds of air in them at all times, even if you're not hauling anything, just so the bag don't get damaged. So, especially in the winter months, those nights that are cool, you know, it's something to keep in mind. You don't want to damage the bags. But to make not only maintenance easier, but making those adjustments easier, you can always use a compressor system, and we're actually getting ready to install this on the truck next here. And this one's made by Airlift. This is a really stout one. It's on board air, so you got a tank, huge compressor, wireless setup, so you can control everything with the remote. So if that's something you're looking to do, that's always an option. This is definitely a lot in terms of components. If you're just wanting a normal compressor system, I like the Airlift, the easy mount wireless ones. They're really responsive. They fill the bags up fast and pretty much eliminate any maintenance that comes along with them. As far as what these bags are going to fit, they'll work with pretty much all of the 3500 Sierras out there, as long as they're 4-wheel drive models, and these are not compatible if your truck has factory air suspension. I guess maybe some of the ones out there have factory air, but apparently Airlift says these aren't going to work with that. With that in mind, we get a lot of people asking about in-bed hitches and if these are going to be compatible with it. And it's hard to speak for every single in-bed hitch out there, but the vast majority of them, you should be in pretty good shape. Airlift is pretty good about making sure their bags are going to be compatible, right? Today we have a perfect example of that. We have a B&W underbed gooseneck hitch installed on this truck. Didn't run into any clearance issues or anything along those lines. So, you know, I think it's pretty safe to say if you got an in-bed hitch, you'll probably be in pretty good shape. These aren't going to be the only suspension enhancement available for your truck. We get a lot of people asking about the 7500 version of the air springs. They're a little bit larger. Airlift makes a set, and Firestone makes a set as well. That's the bag I have here. And you can see they're just bigger than these 5000 series bags. And you know, what one's going to be best for you? It really don't make a huge difference, at least in my opinion. I have noticed with these 7500 versions, you get a lot of the same results, right? So let's say, for example, if the trailer you have hooked up and you need to put 60 pounds of air in the 5000 version bag to make everything level, I found that you don't really need to fill the larger ones up as much, which in turn will make for a little bit more of a smooth ride whenever you're towing. But that's just my experience, and it's not a, you know, crazy change or super noticeable by any means. But just thought I'd mention that. And if you're just looking for something, a little extra help when your truck absolutely needs it, you're not really concerned with all this adjustability, maybe you just tow one trailer every now and again that's really heavy, gives you some issues, you can always use something like this. This is a Timbren, and more or less you just replace the factory Johns bumpers, and that's kind of what they are, just really large ones. And these are going to engage only when the truck starts to squat down and they make contact, and that's when they're going to provide support when you absolutely need it. But you know, you get what you get with these. You can't adjust them, but they are maintenance free. You install them, you don't have to think twice. I will say though, with these, they do tend to make the ride a little bit rougher. So if that's something that's going to bother you, an airbag or air spring might be the way to go then. Other than that, at the end of the day, these are a really popular upgrade for all pickup trucks really, and for good reason, because they work. Having that adjustability is nice, and it's something you really can't go wrong with, to be honest with you. Airlift makes their parts as simple as possible, at least in my opinion, which in turn is going to make the installation go a lot smoother, which is my experience with these here. Everything went together pretty good. Didn't really run into any issues, nothing super complicated, so take your time. You should be in pretty good shape. If this is something you don't feel like bothering with or have the time, I definitely get that. You can always use our dealer locator network, and that can hopefully help you find a shop that can set these up for you. But if you're going to be installing these yourself, feel free to hang around. We'll go ahead and get started on them now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our truck, and first thing I did was just temporarily lower and remove our spare tire. Just gives us a lot more room to work under here. And we're also going to temporarily remove the spare tire heat shield. So kind of along this edge here, there's a couple of 13 millimeter head bolts we can pull out. Here's one of the bolts here. Pull that out, and then there's one more towards the front. Lower the shield down and set it to the side for now. We need to remove our Johns bumpers now, and it helps if you spray some soapy water on these. But you can take a big pry bar or screwdriver, whatever you got, and just pry it out of the cup there. So we're not going to be reinstalling these, and from this point on, whatever we do to this side of our truck, we'll also do to the other side, so it'll be set up the same way. We're going to have this bracket here where our brake line is attached to. And we'll remove that bolt with a 13 millimeter socket. And then there's two lines connected to it. I'm going going to take a trim tool, flathead screwdriver will work, pry that one off, and then this one, you can try to pry it, but what I found almost be easier is to take a pair of needle nose and kind of squeeze the sides of it in. Push it down that way to get it released. At this point, you want to lift up your truck by the frame, and what you're trying to accomplish is to increase the distance between the bottom of the frame rail and the top of your axle tube. So since I'm on a drive-on lift here, I just have a pull jack lifting up by the hitch. To make that happen, for those of you at home, you can use a jack and jack stands. Just use your safety measures. And make sure when you jack or lift the truck up, you're going to do it by the frame. We can start to assemble our air springs now, and these are going to be side specific. First thing you want to do, grab your bag. The top of the bag will have 3 holes, so 2 that will secure it to the bracket. The other one is where our inflation valve is going to go. So take your roll plate, set that on, and take the inflation valve. We'll get that started as tight as we can by hand, and then we can come back with a 7/16 and give it an extra turn and a half. We'll take our upper bracket. These are side specific. Check the instructions to make sure you got the right one, but this is going to set on the spring like that. Line up the holes there. And you can take these bolts, they're a hex head. I have a 7/32 Allen key that I'm going to use. Get both of these started. Just going to lightly snug them down. And we'll come back with a torque wrench and tighten them down to the amount specified in the instructions. And anything that we torque, you can find that spec in the manual. You can flip your assembly over now and take another roll plate, set that on there. And then the lower brackets, there's going to be several holes in them. You can check the diagram and the instructions. What I like to do, just to keep everything organized, is mark what side, so D for driver's side or left side, and then put marks on the holes. This bracket is going to sit up here like this, and you want this portion to be on the same side that the inflation valve is on. So we'll get it like this. And pretty much do the same thing. We got those same screws, or bolts rather. Get them started. Lightly snug them down. And we'll switch out for our torque wrench. I got both of our assemblies built, and here's how they look. So this one is the driver or the left side, and this one is the passenger side. You can grab our spring assemblies now and put them into position. Try to clear all our lines and stuff. So we'll just pull down on that until it roughly goes into position here. With the airbag roughly in place now, you can take this bracket, and they're side specific, but this big wiring connector here, you're gonna push it in through that little bracket, and that's gonna kind of clip around the lower bracket. And you can take a carriage bolt and drop that through. Got a flange nut here. And we'll get this started. Run it all the way up. And you just want to get it hand tight. That way you're still able to kind of maneuver this carriage bolt around here in a little bit. Take this wiring now and put that back in the original bracket. Then this is going to line up with our new lower bracket. You'll take this real small bolt and a flat washer. Get it started by hand, make sure it's lined up, because you'll think you'll have it going and it'll be just kind of going in there crooked. So now that it's hand tight, we'll come back and snug it down. On the front side of the lower bracket, you can take another carriage bolt, put that through the opening. You take this axle strap, put the carriage bolt through it, make a flange nut, and get both of those started. Now what you can do is, I'm going to lower the jack some to kind of close that gap and get the majority of the weight back on this area here, just so we can ensure that everything's centered and where we want it to be. Now we can take this piece of hardware here, and the way this is going to work, this part is going to go up and over the frame and on the other side of the frame. And when it's like that, you can take this long bolt, put on a flat washer, and that's going to drop down it like that. So it's kind of like a two-piece U-bolt almost. Make sure you're not going to, pinch your wiring or anything. You can pop that free if you need to. We got quite a bit of room here though, so I'm just going to take this and drop it down. And what you'll probably have to do is, once you get it over the frame, you might have to keep this kind of in a different position to get this long bolt through there to be able to rotate it down through our bracket. Both of them through here. Of course, I get the handle on our hitch. So make sure you're going to clear all the other components, So now with it down like that, take a flange nut, get one started on each end. You can grab this piece of hardware now, and the way this is going to work, from the outside of the frame going this way, this is going to wrap around that little cup where our Johns pumper, the factory Johns pumper, was installed. So it'll kind of wrap around that and then come out of the two holes in our upper bracket here. So we'll go ahead and get that pushed into place. So these It can be a little tricky sometimes just to get everything lined up. And they are kind of tight, so you might have to, you might have to take a hammer or something and kind of tap it into position, but ours is actually coming through. Once we have it like that, put 2 more flange nuts on. We'll take a 9/16 steep ball socket now and snug down this hardware. And all the hardware that we're going to tighten down now, whether it be a U-bolt or that bail bolt or these, you want to tighten them down evenly. That way everything will draw down in a similar fashion. So, you can tighten this for a second or two, move to this one, kind of go back and forth. You want to make sure that this is somewhat centered as well. We'll go ahead and run these down. We can do the same thing for these flange nuts. And then these ones up here. Now we'll come back and using that same order there, we'll go ahead and torque everything down. Once everything's torqued, don't forget to come back with a 9/16 box wrench and snug up this flange nut that we left hand tight earlier. We're ready to route and set up our airlines now. So they give you a big bundle, and I just cut it in half. And whenever you cut airline, you want to make sure to use a tool like this, or they make tubing cutters. I've even set this on a block of wood and took a utility knife, cut it that way. You want to avoid using a regular pair of snips because it'll probably be kinked a little bit and then leak. So you're looking for a good, clean, straight cut that doesn't have any burrs or anything like that on it. And with this end ready, we can get it plugged in. When you plug these in, these are just quick connect fittings, so they just snap right into place more or less. If you're running the passenger side one, make sure they give you a little thermal sleeve. Put that on the tubing first before you plug it in. And that'll just help protect it against heat. But on the driver's side, we don't have to worry about that. So you'll feel it kind of lock into place. And now with this plugged in, I'll go ahead and get this routed to the back of her truck and show you the path that I took to get them there. The airline tubing, I just have it running up like this, and then I just use some zip ties to secure it to this factory wiring harness. When you're routing anything, make sure to do your best to avoid any hot or moving parts or sharp edges, things like that. It just runs all the way along through the top. I have it dropping down right here. And what we're going to do is take a nut, we'll thread that on, run it down all the way, put on a star washer, and then I'm using an extra flat washer. You don't have to do this, but I had one laying around, and where we're going to mount this, I think it's just going to be better. So I'll put that on, and there's several ways you can mount these up. I'll talk about in a second here, but what we're going to do is use these to replace our license plate screws. So I pulled the license plate screws out and little plastic pieces, and we're just going to push this right through the opening there. Here's where the inflation fitting comes through the plate, and then you're going to put on the rubber washer. a flat washer, and another nut. And with these, I just grab a 1/2-inch socket and just tighten it down by hand. You know, you don't need to get crazy here, just make sure it's snug. And with this one done, I got the passenger side one done already, so we'll check that out and see how we routed it. Here's the passenger side one, set up exactly the same as the driver's side. I did come back to these and put a few inch piece of wire loom over them though, just because they're kind of close to this little piece of metal there. So that loom will give it an extra layer of protection. But with this one, just comes around through here. And on this side, I actually ran our tubing through the frame. So I pushed it through this large opening into the frame. Again, another 6 or 8 inch piece of loom there. Zip tied it up inside of the frame. And here's where it comes out, in our wire loom. And I did that because our exhaust is right here. You know, it's just safer inside of the frame, away from all that heat. This is that thermal sleeve I mentioned earlier. And, you know, I just plugged it right into the fitting there. Over here, just on the passenger side, they give you this heat shield. And you want to install that, you know, on the exhaust closest to the air spring. So what I do is bend these little tabs back like that. And then I pretty much put these clamps on almost all the way tight. Still got a little room to move them around and everything. But then that is going to slide in there like so. Same thing for the bottom one here. Get it set up how you want. And snug them down. We'll put between 40 and 60 pounds of air in the bags now. That way we can check for leaks or any potential clearance issues. To check for leaks, you can take some soapy water and you just want to spray down all of the fittings. And what you're looking for is for bubbles to continuously and rapidly form. All right, if you see that, you know you got a leak. And in our case, I don't see any bubbles continuing to form, nothing along those lines. I don't hear anything leaking. So our fitting is good here. And you'll do that to all of the connection points, right? If you do happen to have a leak, you can let the air out of the system, remove the air line, recut it, plug it back in, check it again. Or if you need to actually take the fitting and tighten it up just a little bit more, then that's something you can do as well. At this point, we don't have any leaks, clearance issues, so we are good to go. You could always reinstall the spare tire heat shield as well as your spare. I'm going to be installing an onboard air compressor though here in a minute, so I'm going to leave that stuff off just to have more working room. But with that said, that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the Airlift LoadLifter 5000 air helper springs for the rear axle on our 2020 GMC Sierra 3500.